Hi, I'm Gary and welcome to my shop. In this video I'm going to show you how I make bottle stoppers. Now this is a very easy project to make and I will show you how. Exercise good shop safety to protect yourself. In this video I will make references to resources and links on the web for more information. I will show those links on the screen that are not too lengthy and I'll put them in the description below. Now I'm going to talk about making bottle stop. 1 is choosing the hardware and body material. 2 is deciding on a design. 3 is making the stopper. Now in this first part I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about some basics. Then I will show you how the process is done. For making bottle stoppers, I consider the following. Selecting a stopper hardware style and finish. Styles can be of many different shapes, sizes, and finishes. If intended for red wines, go with the stainless steel, as the tannic acids in red wines can be corrosive to chrome and gold plating. Selecting a body material. This is usually a wood or an acrylic, and there are other materials. And what I want to do is to match the material and the hardware. If the hardware is chrome or stainless steel, I'll want something that is going to go with the silver color. Probably more of an acrylic or a light colored wood. If gold, probably something of a more yellowish, darker brown or reddish coloring. Now deciding on a shape or style. There are many examples on the web of stopper styles. Just search for bottle stopper images. Not all are a material or a shape you can work with, but there are many examples of shapes you can work with. Most body materials come in a square block shape of various lengths. You want to flatten the 4 sides. This will aid later in squaring up the ends where the hardware meets up with the stopper mandrel. If your workpiece is small, less than 6 inches in length, you'll want to flatten the sides on a disc or a belt sander. If your workpiece is 6 inches or longer, such as spindle blanks, you can safely flatten sides on a joiner. To use a thickness planer, you usually need a workpiece of at least 12 inches long to feed through it. Then you will trim the workpiece to length, usually at least 1.5 inches long, but no longer than 2.5 inches. More than 2.5 inches makes it too hard to control on the lathe when you're only securing the body at the lathe head with the stopper mandrel. Making it too long can make it lose a spinning balance and get out of control. For designing a stopper shape, I use a pattern template to design a shape that I want. Most of the time I shape it freehand at the lathe, but if I have a design in mind I want to replicate, I'll make a pattern. To prepare mounting the blank to the stopper mandrel on the lathe, drill a hole in the end of the workpiece for tapping a thread for the mandrel that you are using. Usually this is drilling a 5/16 hole at least 1 inch deep and then using a 3/8 inch coarse thread tap. And after drilling the hole, go to the sander and square up that end with the hole with the sides. Then go to the bandsaw and trim the long edges to make an octagonal shape for starting the turning process. Then the next steps are mount the blank on the lathe and turn to a basic round or cylindrical shape, then shape it to a desired design or shape, then sand it to a desired smoothness for wood or the acrylic body, then apply a finish or buff the acrylic to a final finish. Then you assemble the hardware to the body, and with all that said, now I'll show you how this is done. Okay, I'm going to get ready to square up my workpiece. This is a piece of Yucatan, however you want to say it, rosewood that I'm going to use as a blank. About a 2-inch square, and I find one edge here that is fairly smooth, and I'll use that as my starting edge on my sander over here to get a couple more squared up edges on this. So I have this sanding surfaces, and what I'll do is I'll put this piece, I find my smoothest, straightest piece, which seems to be this one here. This is off a bit kilter and stuff, but I got to start out with one surface first, then I'll get a square to that, and then I can get a third square. Okay, we've got that down to a good smooth surface, flat. And what I'll do is use that to register another edge here, and I want to do is flatten another angle here. Okay, so I've got that one good and flat. I've got this edge good and flat, that edge good and flat. Then I'm going to get one more edge. I think I will go with that edge, and then it'll go for this edge here. Okay, so I've got flattened on one side, 2 sides, and a third side here. So that'll get me going pretty good for getting squared up, for marking my centers, and getting a good edge on there when I want to square up my ends when I've got the mandrel put into here. When I was shooting this, I didn't have a very good camera angle as to what was going on here. I get my first squaring, so to speak, by getting my smoothest side on the top of this table I'm using so that I'm square with that. And then what I want to do is get this angle squared to this table. Then I can rotate this around to where I've got the squared end here and this squared end here. They should register squarely on there. Then I can do my third surface here to square that up. Okay, so I have my piece squared up. I got 3 edges that are good and flat anyway, not all squared, but 3 edges that are good and flat, and that'll assist me later on when I want to square up the end holes where the bottle stopper screw will go into with the body. This one is already at length about 2 inches, so I'm not going to cut it down any further. You want to get your lengths about 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches at the most. Now if I had a bigger piece that I did like this, this is about a 2x2 spindle blank really. Use these for making handles for pizza cutters, ice cream scoops, and things like that. We use about a 4-inch handle. This can be cut down into about 3 handles, or maybe about 6 bottle stoppers if I wanted to do that. This is where I would cut it down after I've got the sides flattened, as I did with the other piece. Next, what I want to do is to pick a design that I want to do. As you can see, these bottle stoppers here that I've done before, and the various shapes that you can get to these. What I've done is I've made up a piece of grid paper, and I can use this to kind of create my design here. Now on this one, I did this in a dark green Sharpie marker. Kind of laid out, I only need to lay out half of the pattern to compare to when I do turning to see that I'm getting that shape. So I would follow that pattern there. It's not exacting science. Maybe if you had a lathe duplicator, you could do it more exactly. But most of the time I'm doing these things free-handed without even making a pattern. But these patterns are handy when you got something special you want to do, and you can save it for future reference so you can do it again. And it makes it easy to follow. If you're eyeballing it, you can use some calipers and stuff to, check your measurements on that. Now this pattern here is probably similar to this bottle stopper here, kind of a similar pattern. Next step is to start preparing our blank. Now with this diagram that I did here, I did each of these for blocks that are 1.5 inch square, and then for the different lengths of like 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches, and 2 inch. Then you can go further up, 2.25 2.5 inch at the max. Now if you have material that is thicker than 1.5 inch square, like 2 inch square, some of the stuff I'm working with here, you can adapt these diagrams for that, because each one of these grid block on this graph paper equals 1/4 inch. So you can just adapt up, 1/4 inch either way on that to adapt to the size of the blocks you're working with. Okay, my next step is to take the end grain that's going to be the end of this. This is where I want to mark center at. There's a couple different ways I can mark center on this. I can use a center finder, such as this. Get it on there. Now these are never perfectly square, so you want to do is kind of hold this in a consistent fashion in one way or the other and make your mark. And I do is I go around all 4 corners, since I know these blocks are not perfectly square. So there you can see my center is between these 4 lines there. Another way you can do it is using this Blokkz Squid. Doesn't fit over the edges or right up to the edges on this. So if I kind of center it on here fairly well, and then I can just hold it there. Just give it a little tap, and that marks my center hole for me. So a couple of ways of marking center. This Blokkz works great as long as you can get it fairly center there. But I would not use this Blokkz on acrylics, because when you tap this on acrylics, usually the acrylic just breaks apart. Here I've got my stopper blank set up in my vertical drilling jig on my drill press, and I've got it lined up here with that center mark that I made. And I've also got my depth stop set so I only go down 1 inch. So I'll start drilling this through, 5/16 drill bit to start, and then after I drill that hole, I'll wind up tapping that out to a 3/8 coarse thread. Okay, that's drilled to 1 inch deep. Okay, I've got my block here drilled out to 5/16. I've got my 3/8 inch coarse thread tap, and what I do is get this started in here, just start tapping it out. Periodically I'll stop and back up a little bit, clear out some of that. And some of these woods, you don't want to go too hard with it if it's a soft wood, because it can strip out easy enough. Go down until I get to a stop, then I will stop and not force it any further. That was it. Back it out a little bit. Trust it again. Yep, that's the bottom. So I don't want to go any further than that. Don't want to take any chance of stripping out these threads in the wood. Okay, got those threads cut. Should work great. Now this here is the mandrel that will go on the lathe, and once it's on the headstock of the lathe, then this workpiece will screw onto it. That will hold it, and then it'll spin, and I'll use my lathe chisel to shape it to size. Before I do that though, I'm going to go to the bandsaw and cut off these edges here to make it an octagon shape, so it's a lot easier to work with. Here at the bandsaw, I've got my jig set up so I can cut the corners off on this block, making an octagon shape. I have to space it out a little bit here so I can get everything to sit in correctly, then raise my guide height up enough to clear this block. And what I do is position this sideways to take off enough material here, but not to take off too much in spaces where it's going to be shorter. So have to kind of watch for that. We don't want to take off too much material to get this where it's going to be too short in some spots. This block is like this because it's a little bit lopsided, so we're going to get it squared up better. Well, it's still a little bit lopsided, but at least we got kind of equal amount of material all the way around that hole. And then on the lathe, of course, we'll get this into a round. Here at my lathe, I've got my workpiece mounted onto the mandrel, where I just screwed it onto those threads. Then I moved up my tool rest, got it to a close position there. Also adjusted for the height of my lathe chisel that I'll be using on this. So in this example here, since I got 3 good flat sides on my oscillating sander, this one, and then this face here, that allowed me to get a good flat surface when I put it into that vertical drill jig on the drill press. And that allowed me to get a good seat in here all the way around, so I don't need to go back and square up the end. It's already squared up for me. But that's a step that you would normally take after you've drilled the hole, just to square up your ends if it doesn't fit on tightly like this one does. Okay, to start out here, I'm going to get this shaped to a round shape. It's a little bit off right now. It's a little lopsided. But I'll get it down to a round or cylindrical shape, and then from there I can start shaping it to the shape I want. I'm starting out at about 2,000 RPM, a little lower than usual, until I can get this to a good shape and not too lopsided. Like now I'll start picking up the speed a little bit. And now I've got this to a fairly good round. I can see this end is a bit lopsided, so I'll start shaping this up. I have to move my camera back a little bit so I can get some more clearance space here with my chisel. Getting a fairly good shape there. I think maybe a little bit more out of this metal here. This end is coming up pretty good here. As you can see, I'm trying to follow kind of along this pattern here for my shape. And I just kind of get the general gist of that shape. Now I will start the sanding. I go from a 150 to a 600 grit. I like to slow it down to about 2,000 RPM. Getting very smooth. Down to the last grit now. Very good. Very smooth. Now, what I'll apply is some finish, and I use this. I use a variety of different things. On this one, I'm going to use this Bandsawing finish. I'll slow it down a little bit more yet. Maybe at about 1,000. This will really make the grains pop. Looking good. Give that a chance to dry for a little bit. Then I'll come back, go over it with some steel wool, and then do a couple more coats. So here I have the bottle stopper basically completed, the body and the hardware. For this one, because it's a kind of a reddish color wood, I'm using a gold plated bottle stopper here. This will go with the wood very well. Just snugs on there and holds very well and fits into the bottle to seal off your wine. And this shape, basic shape, I use a lot because it's easy to grasp and pull and remove it. Now the nice thing about these bottle stoppers is that they seal well, that you can lay a bottle on its side like in the refrigerator to chill it and it won't leak. So these are great. Well, to wrap this up, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got the inspiration to make something of your own. Please give me a like and share with your family and friends. And please subscribe to see what I may come up with next. Thank you.